Part 1. When noon turned to night at first, no one believed the old herders. They spoke of a storm that could swallow the sun, a blizzard so thick it could make day look like midnight. But in Yakutia, where the mercury sinks past -71°C and the air itself cuts like a knife, people listen when elders speak. It was midday when the sky began to dim, not in the slow way clouds thicken before snow, but like someone was pouring ink over the horizon. One moment the snowy tundra stretched, wide and open, reindeer herds grazing under a pale blue sky. The next, a line of shadow swept across the land, fast, silent, and unnatural. The wind started without warning, no gentle buildup, no whisper of change. Just a hard slap from nowhere, carrying snow so fine it felt like smoke. Dogs howled, reindeer bunched together, and voices were ripped from mouths before they could reach another ear. I was standing near the sleds, helping strap down supplies. My gloves, lined with fur, were already stiff from the cold. But now, every seam felt brittle, every breath sharper. We could still see the campfires then, flickering like tiny eyes in the distance. But within minutes, they were gone, erased by the wall of white. That's when I understood what the elders meant by sky going black. It wasn't just the clouds. The storm itself carried a darkness, a swirling curtain that devoured light. The snowflakes didn't fall, they flew sideways, stinging skin like sand. The ground and the air became one. There was no up, no down, only cold, wind, and noise. The temperature was already deadly before the storm hit. Now, it dropped further, at -71°C. You don't feel cold the same way. Skin doesn't ache, it just goes numb, fast. Your breath freezes on your eyelashes, then blinds you. A splash of exposed skin is enough for frostbite in under a minute. I wrapped my scarf tighter, but the cold still found ways in, creeping through fabric like a thief. Our lead herder, Mikhail, shouted orders I couldn't hear. All I could see was his shape moving through the blur. He waved toward the sled dogs. They were already curling into tight balls against the wind, their fur crusted with ice. Some wouldn't move unless dragged. The worst part wasn't the wind or even the cold. It was the way the darkness messed with your mind. You could be standing still and still feel like you were spinning, falling, losing balance. A man could walk 5 steps in the wrong direction and never find his way back. That's how people vanish here, not in some dramatic collapse, but by drifting a little too far from safety and never returning. I tightened the straps on my sled, praying they'd hold. The sound of cracking ice echoed from the frozen river. Nearby, muffled but close enough to set my teeth on edge, somewhere in that roaring dark, I thought I heard something heavy move. Maybe a reindeer breaking away. Maybe the storm itself playing tricks. The last thing I saw before the blackness swallowed us whole was Mikhail's hand, raised high, pointing toward a cluster of sleds barely visible ahead. That was where we had to get. But between us and safety was a storm no one had ever seen before, and it had just begun. Part 2. The storm that ate the sky. The first thing the storm took was sound. Not in silence, but in the opposite, in such a roar that it erased all other noise. It was a wall of wind so loud it made the earth feel hollow beneath our boots. The crunch of snow, the barking of dogs, even the pounding of my own heart, all of it vanished beneath that endless, grinding howl. Mikhail's shadow moved ahead, a blurred figure in a shifting fog of snow. His movements were jerky, urgent, every gesture aimed at keeping us from scattering. The sleds creaked and groaned as they strained against the lash of the wind. I gripped the wooden rail so hard my gloves froze stiff to it, but I didn't dare loosen my hold. The cold changed too. It was no longer just freezing, it was biting, clawing its way past wool and fur, seeping into my bones. At -71°C, the line between cold and danger disappears. The body stops sending warning shivers and starts shutting down without asking permission. My fingertips felt like splinters of glass, and my toes, I couldn't tell if they were still there. The snow wasn't falling, it was flying, pulled from the ground, whipped into spirals, thrown into our faces. My fur hood filled with ice, pulling down on my neck. Each breath I took felt like swallowing knives, and every exhale turned into tiny, sharp crystals that fell against my scarf. We moved in a slow, stumbling line. The camp that had been 20 steps away was now gone, as if it had never existed. Shadows loomed and disappeared, the shapes of other sleds, the occasional glimpse of antlers from reindeer pressing into the storm, their bodies shaking, but refusing to break formation. Somewhere behind me, a sled overturned. I didn't see it happen. I only caught the sound of wood cracking and dogs yelping. Before the wind swallowed it whole, I turned back, trying to find whoever had gone down. But Mikhail's hand shot up again, signaling me forward. In this kind of storm, you couldn't risk stopping. Every second in one spot was a second closer to freezing in place. Then came the darkness in full. It was as if the storm had been holding back, letting us see just enough to hope. Now the blackness fell completely. The snow wasn't white anymore. It was gray, thick, alive, churning so violently it felt like the sky itself had descended to smother the earth. And then I realized something that made my stomach clench. I couldn't see Mikhail anymore. I stopped dead, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I turned in a slow circle, searching for his shadow. Nothing, just the swirling storm, each gust shifting the snow into new shapes, tricking my eyes into thinking I saw movement. A dog bumped into my leg. My lead husky bore, his fur stiff with ice. He looked up at me with eyes wide and wild. His breath came in bursts of steam that froze almost instantly. That was when I made the choice: follow the dogs. Reindeer could wander, sleds could drift, but dogs always knew where warmth was. I unclipped the lead line and let Boar pull me forward, trusting that somewhere in this boiling darkness, he could still smell the trail. My boots caught in drifts so deep they nearly ripped them from my feet. Each step was a fight against the wind, as if some invisible hand was pushing me back, trying to keep me out in the cold. Finally, faint, almost hidden, I saw a flicker of orange. A campfire. No, not a fire. The light of an oil lantern, swinging violently in the wind. The storm seemed to sense my discovery, because it hit harder, snow cutting my cheeks open like glass. Boar lunged forward, dragging me the last few steps. And just as I thought we'd made it, a sound rose above the wind, low, deep, and close. Not the moan of the storm, not the creak of ice. Something else was out there with us. Part 3. The thing moving in the black snow. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks, that the storm's roar had bent into a shape my brain decided was a sound. But then it came again, clearer this time, a rumble that rose and fell like something breathing. I froze, my knees locking, the wind tearing at my coat. Boar stood rigid beside me, his hackles bristling under the frost, his head turning toward the darkness beyond the swinging lantern. He growled low, the sound barely audible over the storm, but I felt it through the rope in my hand. I squinted into the swirling snow, my eyelashes crusted with ice. Shapes shifted in and out of the black, not solid shapes, but smears like shadows being dragged across a curtain. My first thought was reindeer, a straggler, maybe, lost in the storm. But no reindeer moved like that. This thing moved lower, slower, like it was gliding. Boar's growl deepened. The other dogs, the ones tied to the sled, had gone silent, which was worse than barking. Dogs bark when they're scared. They go silent when they know something is too close. The rumble came again. It wasn't far now. I took a step backward, my boots sinking into snow that grabbed at my ankles. My eyes darted toward the lantern, toward the faint outline of a sled and figures crouched around it, barely visible through the blizzard. But between me and them was a wall of black snow, and somewhere inside it, that sound. The cold bit deeper, sharper. It felt almost alive, like it was wrapping around my legs to hold me in place. My breath came faster, each inhale burning my lungs. Boar jerked on the rope, pulling toward the camp, but my gaze stayed locked on the storm ahead. Then, for just a heartbeat, the snow thinned, and I saw it. A bulk, massive, formatted with frost, its outline barely distinguishable from the storm. Around it, I couldn't make out a head, just the curve of a body that seemed impossibly wide. Low to the ground, moving with a slow, deliberate sway, and then it was gone again, swallowed by the black. I didn't think, I ran. The snow tried to trip me, the wind shoved me sideways. but Boar dragged me forward like his life depended on it. My feet barely found purchase, slipping over ice, sinking into drifts. But every stumble was met with another pull from the dog. The lantern grew larger, brighter. A voice shouted my name, the sound breaking through the storm like a lifeline. I pushed harder, feeling something, maybe just the cold, maybe not, brushing against the edge of my coat. We burst into the light, stumbling into a ring of crouched figures shielding the lantern with their bodies. Mikhail grabbed my arm, his face pale under the frost. "What's out there?" he shouted over the wind. I opened my mouth to answer, but then the lantern light caught on something behind me. Two eyes, yellow, unblinking, and far too high off the ground to be anything I wanted to meet in this storm. The next moment, the light flickered and the eyes vanished into the black. Part 4. When the storm decided, who stayed? Elavino. One spoke after the eyes vanished. The wind screamed around us, rattling the sled runners and snapping at the tent canvas. But in our little circle of light, there was only the heavy breathing of men who knew the difference between fear and danger. This was danger. Mikhail didn't waste time asking again. He shoved the lantern toward Pavel, barking for him to check the ropes on the sled dogs. Then he turned to me. "Inside. Now." But before I could move, Boar let out a sharp, panicked yelp, the kind that says it's right here. A shadow lunged at the very edge of the light, and for a moment I thought the lantern had played a trick on my eyes again. But no, something had moved fast, too fast for anything in this storm. The dogs went berserk, snapping and pulling at their lines. One sled tipped, spilling gear into the snow. The lantern swayed wildly, throwing jagged beams into the black. Around us, every time the light hit the swirling snow just right, I thought I saw a shape out there, circling. "We can't stay here," Pavel shouted, yanking on the sled ropes. His eyes were wide, darting into the dark like a man trying to keep count of predators he couldn't see. "We move. We're blind," Mikhail snapped back. "It follows. We're finished." The storm chose that moment to roar harder, knocking the lantern sideways. For a split second, we were in complete darkness, and in that darkness, something hit the sled hard. The impact sent one of the rear dogs tumbling into the snowbank, yelping and twisting in its harness. I lunged toward it, my gloves already thick with ice, my body screaming at me to move faster. The wind knifed through my coat, every gust stealing heat from my bones. Boar barked and lunged into the dark, straining so hard against his rope that it cut into my wrist. I hauled him back just as the lantern steadied again and caught another glimpse of the eyes. Closer now, lower. Mikhail's face was set like carved stone. "Tie everything down." We waited out. Waiting it out meant huddling under the sled, the snow piling over us like dirt on a coffin. The wind didn't just howl, it whispered too, curling around the edges of our shelter like it was looking for a way in. Every so often, I'd hear the crunch of snow just beyond the sled runners, too deliberate to be the storm. Time stopped meaning anything. It could have been minutes or hours when the sound changed. Not the storm, the crunching turned into a dragging, as though something heavy was being pulled in a wide circle round us. Once, it passed so close that the dogs whined and pressed their bodies against ours for warmth and safety. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. The dragging faded, replaced once more by the wild, endless roar of the storm. When the first gray light of morning bled into the sky, the wind had calmed to a whisper. We crawled out from under the sled, stiff and half-frozen. The snow was sculpted into strange, curling shapes, and 30 meters from where we'd huddled, a set of tracks led away into the tundra. Massive, round, and spaced so far apart I couldn't imagine the thing that had made them. Mikhail didn't say a word. He just looked at the tracks for a long moment, then turned toward the sleds. "We move," he said quietly. Now, we never spoke about the storm again, but I still dream of those eyes waiting in the black.